May this be one of the best moments of your life. You're listening to the Business Mirror Podcast for a broader look on business with Senior Editor Dennis Estopace.
Good day, I'm Dennis Estopace, and our topic for today is about mass housing. The journalist behind the story on the mass housing mess, why Filipinos continue to struggle with owning a home, is Business Mirror's Kai Ordinario, who, with reporter Jasper Emmanuel Arcalas, will help us with this podcast. For the text version of Miss Ordinario's story, please go to www.businessmirror.com.ph and search for mass housing. Miss Ordinario's story was published on January 31, 2019. Let's get on with the story. Mass housing should be for all, but many Filipinos, particularly those belonging to lower middle-income families, still feel left out of the equation. The family of Bituin Mendoza, not her real name, is an example. Mendoza's family has been a renter for over a decade. Her mother, a domestic helper in Hong Kong, has been saving up for a home since she started working abroad 13 years ago. They are currently renting a home from her father's friend, who is currently an overseas Filipino worker in Dubai. The friend has been behind in mortgage payments, and, as the caretakers of the home, Mendoza's mother pays for back payments that serve as their rent. Mendoza's mother's remittance helped pay back payments worth nearly $3,000. Around $2,000 more are needed to fully cover the back payments. While making sure they pay all bills and obligations, rent and utilities, the Mendozas still dream they will come home to a house they would call their own someday.
This is the reason my mother is saving her money. When she comes home permanently, buying a house will be my parents' next project. We just need to finish paying for the house we are currently living in so that we can finally leave.
As for Brix Villarroel, owning a home is on the horizon for him and his family. His family, composed of his mother and a younger sibling who is still in school, is currently renting a home in Vito Cruz, Manila. Initially, their rent started at nearly $300 a month and steadily increased to about $351 every month. A couple of years back, Villarroel and his mother searched for a place they could finally call their own. Near where they rent is a condominium unit being sold for 2 million pesos, or around $39,000. The Villarroels entertained the thought of buying it by securing loans from the private sector and the government. But they found the space was quite small for the amount of investment they needed to make. Another hurdle is Villarroel's tenure. He's been working less than 3 years for the company. This makes him ineligible for a loan from the Home Development Mutual Fund, more commonly known as Pag-ibig Fund. This sets back the Villarroels' plan to about 3 years. While owning a home is a good thing for single mother Estrella Di Maculangan, also not her real name, it is not the most practical. Di Maculangan said renting a house is the most affordable option for her right now. Raising a child on her own after her partner passed away is not easy, and the mounting bills associated with schooling and healthcare can take their toll on a meager salary. Di Maculangan said she is currently living with her family in a house they have been renting for over 30 years in Singalong, Manila. Since her sister married the son of their landlady, they only pay a small rent of about $2,500 a month. Their simple home is just a studio-type house, and she shares it with 4 other family members, including her child. She said even if there was an option to secure a loan from Pag-ibig, she did not entertain it because she thinks she would not be able to meet the payments given her salary and the cost of raising a child on her own. Di Maculangan also recalled the experiences of a friend who defaulted on her Pag-ibig payments for a house in Molino, Cavite. The friend even offered her the house, but as she was averse to securing loans and the house was quite far from her work and family, she did not consider buying it.
Mother sells vegetables in the wet market, but the profits are not that much. As for me, I'm a single parent, so I had to budget every peso I have in my pocket.
Welcome back. You're still listening to the Business Mirror Podcast for a broader look on business with Senior Editor Dennis Estopace.
Mendoza, Villarroel, and Di Maculangan are among the millions of middle-income household members who are renting nationwide. Based on a rental study conducted by the Philippine Statistical Research and Training Institute, or PSRTI, middle-income families accounted for the bulk, or about 889,033 families, of the 1.5 million who are renting homes nationwide in 2012. Based on the PSRTI study, Mendoza would classify under the renta class of 10,000 pesos to nearly 15,000 pesos. Villaruel would be classified under the 15,000 pesos and over, and Dimaculangan would belong to the 2,000 peso level to nearly 4,000 peso level. The PSRTI said there were about 33,200 households in Mendoza's level of rent, while in the case of Villaruel, there were about 10,969 households. Dimaculangan belongs to the second largest group, with 467,693 households renting at the levels of 2,000 pesos to about 4,000 pesos. The study stated that the rental level of 1,000 pesos to nearly 2,000 pesos a month included the most number of households at nearly 500,000 families. Also noteworthy is that Dimaculangan belongs to the 122,034 families paying around 2,000 pesos to nearly 4,000 pesos for rent, and is a female-headed household. Alvin Ang, director of the Ateneo Center for Economic Research and Development, said middle-income households are especially sensitive to price. Such households are looking for investments that would allow them to maximize their hard-earned pesos. Dr. Ang said this means they are looking for homes that are affordable and near their place of work. They also prefer worthwhile investments that can accommodate their families comfortably. The problem with these requirements is that these usually come at a price that few middle-income households can afford.
I think the lower middle-income class is finding it difficult to buy their own home and not the entire middle-income class. Clearly, the options presented by real estate firms and Pag-ibig aren't attractive because the current levels of disposable income won't allow the lower middle-income class to allocate some amount for housing. If they allocate money for housing, they surely sacrifice spending for necessities and consequently lower their current standard of living.
That was Sid Terosa, Dean of the University of Asia and the Pacific School of Economics. Part of this difficulty, not only for the lower middle-income households in the Philippines, but also of Filipinos of higher or lower incomes, is the fact that the growth of real wages has been flat. Marife Ballesteros, Vice President of the Philippine Institute for Development Studies or PIDS, said this makes the cost of homes the primary concern when buying housing units. Ballesteros referred to the presentation made by the Housing and Urban Development Coordinating Council or HUDC on its flagship Filipino housing program, Balay, or Building Adequate, Livable, Affordable, and Inclusive Filipino Communities. Balay is a Malay word for house, and it shows that the ceiling for socialized housing programs remains steep for millions of Filipino households. In Memorandum Circular 2 Series of 2018, issued last September 2018, then HUDC Secretary General Falcone Millar said the ceiling for socialized housing is 700,000 pesos for a 22 square meter property. Millar said 750,000 pesos is the ceiling for a 24 square meter property in Metro Manila or the National Capital Region and other areas. These other areas included nearby areas where millions of workers in NCR currently reside. Some of these are San Jose del Monte City in Bulacan, Caintayan Antipolo City in Rizal, San Pedro City in Laguna, and Carmona, Imus, and Bacoor in Cavite. The Balay Housing Program is the Duterte administration's 10-year National Housing Program strategy to close the country's shelter gap. The program aims to improve government efforts in addressing Filipinos' needs for housing. The private sector is seen as playing a significant and pivotal role. However, based on the Family Income and Expenditure Survey or FIES of 2015, the average income in the Philippines is at 267,000 pesos per household per year. The Philippine Statistics Authority, on the other hand, estimated there were a total of 22.73 million households in 2015.
Welcome back. You're still listening to the Business Mirror podcast. For a broader look on business with Senior Editor Dennis Estopase.
In reality, it's going to still be affordability that matters. Based on the HUDCC program Balay in their presentation, socialized housing was still expensive, around 750,000 pesos, without them thinking that people won't be able to afford that because real wages are flat. So even if you try to explain to them, they seem not to understand.
Ballesteros added that, with real wages being flat, the chances of Filipinos getting a loan from a private bank would be slim. This is the same consideration when Filipinos resort to in-house financing in real estate companies. This usually helps them secure their units, but they still need to pay a certain amount of equity and would have to pay longer to own their units. Ballesteros said that even government institutions like Pag-ibig will also not be as open to lending higher amounts to individuals who do not have the capacity to pay for certain housing units. Due to these constraints, middle-income households will resort to renting units. The only problem is, you can rent for many years and pay amounts equivalent to paying for your own home without owning the house you are staying in.
Even regular employees, I agree, have no choice but to rent. Our drivers here, even after several years, are still renting, and then they rent from informal rental facilities because that is within their budget.
Building a house for every Filipino family is the Philippines' one dream. Many politicians have attempted to reach this dream call, and several of them could be considered successful. These include the housing program in Quezon City dubbed Bistecville, which has been undertaken by the Local Government Unit or LGU with FINMA Property Holdings Corporation since 2011. This was Quezon City's response to the housing needs of more than 200,000 families living in areas considered danger zones. 80% of these families are informal settlers or ISFs, according to non-government organization Habitat for Humanity. Bistecville housing units can be availed of by Quezon City residents who are considered informal settler families. These families are those living along rivers, creeks, and esteros, those under transmission lines, those affected by infrastructure projects, and those evicted through court order. They must also be able to pay monthly amortizations and should be members of Pag-ibig Fund. As payment, the LGU allows flexibility to future homeowners. For example, a unit worth 400,000 pesos can be paid from 1 year to 30 years. Those who choose to pay for their units for 3 decades would need to pay about 2,645 pesos per month. Those who intend to pay for the unit for 1 year would need to pay nearly 35,000 pesos a month. Other LGUs such as Pasig City also have a housing program that involves the construction of medium-rise buildings in various in-city relocation sites, such as Amang Rodriguez Avenue, Mangahan, and Barangay Santa Lucia, among others. Ballesteros added the Pasig City LGU is also accredited by other cities in terms of relocating informal settlers. She said Pasig City provides full support to these families who are relocated to other cities and municipalities. A memorandum of agreement with these cities and municipalities makes the move painless for ISFs in Pasig.
The receiving LGUs would often complain, "You're putting all your squatters here in our areas." But Pasig is different. They welcome Pasig ISFs because they receive full support, meaning complete resettlement sites.
The primary issue here is the capability of LGUs to provide the need of ISFs for in-city relocation or resettlement in other areas. This required LGUs like Pasig City and Quezon City to adjust their finances to be able to raise funds for socialized housing and to resettle ISFs. Ballesteros said in the case of Pasig, it included in its revenue code that socialized housing funds will come from 1% of the assessed value of houses worth 1.5 million pesos. This is coupled by efforts to charge idle land taxes. In the case of Quezon City, the recent increase in real estate taxes went to socialized housing efforts. These efforts work toward helping the country meet its housing targets under the Philippine Development Plan. Under PDP Chapter 12, targets focused on providing access to affordable, adequate, safe, and secure shelter in well-planned communities. This is in the hope of addressing income inequality and meeting government's goal called Ambition 2040.
Welcome back. You're still listening to the Business Mirror podcast for a broader look on business with Senior Editor Dennis Estopase.
Ambition 2040 wants to meet the ambition that Filipinos own a single detached home by the year 2040. The Philippine government also intends to decrease the proportion of urban population living in informal settlements from 7.53% in 2016 to about 5.53% by the year 2022. The government also aims to improve the proportion of socialized housing targets met to housing needs. The government also aims to improve the proportion of housing targets to what is needed. The Philippine Development Plan aims to increase the proportion of socialized housing by 16.53% and low-cost housing 5.5% by the year 2022 from the 2016 baselines of 8.6% and 5.27% respectively. In terms of delivering socialized housing units, the Philippine Development Plan aims to increase delivered socialized housing to about 1 million by 2022 from 82,612 in the year 2016. For low-cost housing, the target is 361,398 units by the year 2022 from just 50,626 in 2016. The National Economic and Development Authority or NEDA said these targets may be hampered by suitable land for socialized and low-cost housing and the availability of basic services and utilities like water, power supply, if they are provided on time. Further, the NEDA said adequate budget for housing may also fall short and issues in land titling, land conversion, and compliance to land development or housing construction documentary requirements are resolved. Apart from these reservations, Ballesteros said the targets may not have robust baselines, considering that there are data considerations when it comes to determining how many informal settler families there are and how many people are looking for their own homes. Ballesteros said getting the numbers right is the common factor of Asian countries, such as Singapore, that have implemented successful housing programs. She added that determining how many people need homes and where to find them were basic considerations.
Actually, you don't have any information, even if you search anywhere. What is the population of the informal settlers? The numbers are different. The only thing you have is the CPH, or the Census of Population and Housing, but it's significantly lower than the estimates of LGUs because they too conduct a census. The only problem is that they are not able to properly monitor, and usually their survey is done only for a single year. After that, we don't know.
However, there are also those who believe the affordability of housing units only becomes a problem when it comes to low-income and poor households. PIDS Senior Research Fellow Jose Ramon Albert said middle-income Filipinos in general do not have problems accessing housing options. Albert said these families just need to determine the best option for them financially. However, Albert also noted the absence of hard data to support claims that middle-income households are indeed having a difficult time purchasing homes. In fact, there is evidence to the contrary. Private sector economist Calixto Chiquiamco said, real estate firms always say they are enjoying brisk sales. However, Albert said many of those buying homes were Chinese nationals and or Chinese companies.
I'm not aware of that middle-income households finding it difficult to buy homes as a fact. We wouldn't have a housing boom if the middle class wasn't buying.
Chiquiamco also pointed to a property developer and added that its condominium units are always sold out and their buyers are middle class. On top of these concerns is the fact that the Philippines has yet to pass the National Land Use Act. The bill, which has been languishing in Congress for over 20 years, promises to protect prime agricultural lands, to provide rationalized land use planning in the country, to consolidate national laws on land uses, and to address long-standing land use conflicts. In a report to the United Nations, the HUDC said in 2016 that passing an effective land use policy was crucial in meeting the challenges of rapid urbanization.
Welcome back. You're still listening to the Business Mirror podcast. For a broader look on business with Senior Editor Dennis Estopase.
Efforts that have been recently put in place by the government to meet the country's long-standing housing needs include the introduction of the balanced housing in 2016. That took effect in 2017 to 2018. There was also the Manila Bay Mandamus, which was passed in 2011 and is now being implemented. There's also Republic Act 10884, or the Balanced Housing Development Program Act. The law sought to amend the Urban Development and Housing Act of 1992. The law seeks to make housing more affordable for Filipinos and encourage more participation of the private sector in socialized housing. RA 10884 created one-stop shops nationwide for the processing, approval, and issuance of clearances, permits, and licenses to reduce the number of days in processing housing development down to 90 days. The law requires owners and/or developers of proposed subdivision and condominium projects to develop an area for socialized housing equivalent to at least 15% of the total subdivision area or total subdivision project cost. The law also requires owner to allot at least 5% of the condominium area or project cost at the option of the developer in accordance with the standards as provided by law. Apart from this, recent efforts stated in the Manila Bay Mandamus have also started implementation. The Mandamus ordered the Metropolitan Manila Development Authority or MMDA to remove informal settlers near rivers that snake along the Pasig-Marikina-San Juan route and the Parañaque-Zapote-Las Piñas areas. The removal of ISFs along the Navotas, Malabon, Tuliahan, Tenejeros River is also expected. The Mandamus sought to demolish all these structures to help clean up the rivers and, eventually, Manila Bay. Ballesteros said the Mandamus is forcing LGUs to take a look at their waterways and comply with the government's policy to relocate informal settler families. This is also paving the way for LGUs to create housing and resettlement programs, according to Ballesteros. Aside from these, the creation of the Department of Housing and Urban Development, or DHUD, is a piece of legislation that is well supported by the current administration. Economic managers have endorsed the creation of the Department of Housing and Urban Development to finally put an end to Filipinos' housing woes. However, much needs to be done to make the dream of Filipinos of having a home a reality. Ballesteros pointed out that the mindset of the National Housing Authority, or NHA, has to change, particularly on the delivery of housing units. She said the NHA considers turnover as the completion of a housing unit and not the actual turnover of a unit to an informal settler family or any other household. Ballesteros said this could be the reason why many government housing projects were left unoccupied. Such was the state of the housing units in Bulacan that were claimed by Kadamay members in 2017. Ballesteros said the government should also look at mixed-use developments along major infrastructure projects as opportunities to create socialized housing projects. These include the North Trail and South Trail projects that are expected to address the housing needs of millions of Filipinos without endangering their sources of livelihood. Ballesteros said the NHA needs to step up in this regard, since the bulk of the government's housing budget is allocated for the agency. She added that even the Department of Public Works and Highways should also work with the NHA not only in terms of relocating residents when they expropriate right-of-way, but also find ways to incorporate housing in its projects.
For the NHA, delivered means there are physical targets they were able to build. Whether or not these homes will be occupied, they are considered delivered. But now, the DBM, or the Department of Budget and Management, is actively requesting that there will be residents for the NHA projects. This was included in their measures of quality. It should respond to a need. Otherwise, if nobody will occupy the unit, you are not responding to a need. When you say need in housing, there are a lot of aspects. You're not just dealing with one type of commodity, one characteristic of a commodity. We still have a lot of areas for expansion. For instance, you have this North and South Rail. They should already think about what can be done there. Imagine that development will run from Bicol to Manila. That's a big size of land, so government should plan. Part of that area should be for socialized housing. Until we do that, it will be the same chicken and egg situation, and NHA doesn't listen.
Building houses for all Filipinos is not a one-man job. Ballesteros believes it's time to move forward with participatory efforts that encourage the building not only of houses but also of communities. The Filipino middle class, even the low income and the poor, deserve to own a home. It is part of their Ambition 2040. It is their hope that this dream of owning a piece of the land of their birth will cease to be a dream but become their reality.
Thank you for listening to the Business Mirror podcast. For a broader look on business, follow us on Facebook and Twitter at Business Mirror. Until next time.